Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. My name is Crown and today we are going to have some more stories that I hope that you will enjoy. But before we start, it will be so much appreciated if you would subscribe to the channel, like the video if you enjoyed it, and maybe leave a comment down below. These simple clicks would mean a lot to the future of this channel and really reward the effort that I put in every day. And now, without further ado, let's go! First story. Revenge is best served frozen. We don't own a car and we live at the end of a cul-de-sac. I have people use my driveway all the time to turn around. It is not a huge deal to me. A little annoying when they compact the snow and it's harder to shovel, but whatever. One of my neighbors had a ride service come pick up their child every day. The van would park in my spot and begin honking at like 8 a.m. I worked nights at the time. Half the time he'd be half parked on my grass. I told my neighbor that I don't overly mind my spot being used, but not if he's going to honk like that every morning, and especially not if he's going to drive over what little lawn I have every time. She spoke with him, and he ignored it. I spoke with him and got, "What's your problem, man? It's not like you're using it." To which I repeated that I don't mind him using it if he stays off my grass and doesn't honk every morning. Apparently suggesting he wait till the kid notices he's there or God forbid he has to drag himself out of the car to knock on a door was just ridiculous and inhumane of me. So I left a recycle bin at the foot of my driveway and he just ran it over. I called the dispatch for the ride service and was told they are subcontractors and technically self-employed, but they will pass along the message. I woke up the next day to pounding on my door. The dude was angry. "How dare you call my boss, you stupid piece of crap? What the heck is wrong with you?" Well, it's quite simple. You were told not to use my driveway if you were going to drive on my lawn and wake me up every single morning. Now get off my doorstep. I'll sue you if I lose my job because of you. You've been warned. Do not trespass on my driveway or property again. The dude storms off in a huff, spouting obscenities and so on. So this happens on a Thursday. The kids have a PD day the next day, and it's supposed to be one of those delightful Canadian weekends where it drops to like -40 Celsius. For my American friends, -40 is where Celsius and Fahrenheit meet up, so it's freaking cold. So that night, I grabbed one of my more beat-up plastic garbage bins, made sure to plug all the holes with a generous amount of duct tape, stuck a sign on it that said, "Private property, driveway not for public use," and proceeded to fill it to the brim with water. Now, before anyone thinks I'm a jerk willing to potentially endanger the other kids in the car, I'd like to point out that my neighbor's kid is the first to be picked up, so it's just him in the car. Cue Monday morning. He sees a garbage can, packs up a bit more, and defiantly charges the garbage can as if to teach me a lesson and proceeds to cause some pretty serious damage to the front end of his car. Dude gets out fuming, calls the cops and comes pounding on my door screaming about how I'm going to buy him a new car and that I'm about to be arrested. The cops arrive shortly and one of them asks, "So let me make sure I understand the situation. He asked you not to park here if you couldn't refrain from honking, then warned you not to park here and put up a barrier. And now you expect him to be charged and pay for damages you caused yourself to your vehicle in an attempt to destroy his own personal property?" I will never forget the look on his face when the officer said, "Yeah, that's not how it works," and turned to me and asked if I wanted to pursue charges for him damaging my personal property. I said yes, and after being done with everything, I went back home to enjoy a morning coffee while watching him from my kitchen window as he paced back and forth in the cold, waiting for a tow truck and having to call the company he worked for to explain why they needed to send out another driver to complete his route. What a jerk. Next story. How fast was the heathen going when he backed into your father? I am going to be deliberately vague about places and exact dates, for reasons that will be apparent shortly. Background. This was back in the 90s. I'd recently been medically retired from the military and was attending college in Texas. My wife was working in her chosen field while I did my level best to decide what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. Anyway, one day I left the campus, going around the backside to avoid the traffic. I was heading over to pick up my wife for lunch and ended up sitting behind another car at a stop sign. The car in front of me was a brand new Chevy, one of their little trendy models. The actual trade name escapes me at the moment. In candy apple red, being driven by a fairly new blonde. Also a pretty model. I sat, an older sailor in an old pickup, just listening to the radio and thinking about lunch when the Chevy drove into the intersection and then stopped. I didn't think anything of it, so I hadn't done more than put my hand on the gear shift in preparation of pulling up, when suddenly, with a suitable squeal of tire, the Chevy shot back at me. I slapped the shift into reverse, but it was too late. The little Chevy smashed into the front of my truck, doing around 25 to 30 miles per hour. After a second, I cut my engine, got out of the cab, and walked around to the front of my truck. The good news was that I could see that I wasn't going to have to worry about that loose built squeal anymore. The bad news is that the front of my little pickup was pretty much totaled. Grill drove back into the radiator, water all over the pavement, headlights smashed, and I pinned down and noted that there seemed to be oil leaking as well. With a sigh of total incomprehension, I walked further up to the passenger door of the little red Chevy and its blonde driver. I was angry, but not enraged. I guess I was still trying to figure out exactly what had happened and why she'd ended up stopping in mid-turn and put it in reverse like that. I looked through the tinted window and she was on the phone, talking agitatedly to someone. With all the cell phone silliness I'd seen since leaving the military, seeing her yapping on one really did not surprise me. Although, had I thought about it, I should have wondered who exactly she was calling. Instead, I tapped on the window and she turned a bland face to me, then screamed into the phone loud enough to penetrate the glass. "Oh my god, he's got a tire iron!" Naturally, I spun around and looked behind me. Then the nickel dropped. I turned in a slow circle and noted there was no businesses, houses or apartments in view, nor was anyone on the sidewalks or walking down the roads. For that matter, the only traffic was several blocks away in any direction. Her little car was sitting at the stop sign, almost exactly where it had been when I pulled in behind her. I stepped back and looked at our vehicles. Yep, it looked for all the world as if I'd rear-ended her. Oh no, the little witch had set me up. I quickly walked back to my truck, thinking as fast as I could. Any minute now, a police car was going to show up, called by the little blonde, expecting to find a crazed man with a tire iron. And I dearly needed not to be that man. I pulled my tire iron out from behind my seat and threw it as far as I could into the nearby field, then jumped into my truck. It was a slim chance, but it was the only hope I had. I made sure the truck was in reverse, then pelted myself in, slammed my face into the steering wheel, opened my door, and heard sirens not too far away, and half slammed out the open door at an uncomfortable angle. I went limp just as the police car screeched to a halt. I ignored the policeman screaming at me to get out of the truck, trusting that my limp body would not move him to open fire. He finally edged his way over, noticed the bloody nose, tugged at an eyelid. I made sure my eye was well rolled up, and let me drop back into position. I stayed limp while he checked on the blonde, who was near hysterical with fright over the lunatic with a tire iron. Until she saw me, that is. I'd hope that her rearview mirror was as off as it looked, or that she'd be too involved with concocting her own story to notice what I was doing. At seeing my body hanging limply below the driver's door of my truck, she stammered to a halt. A second set of sirens had been getting closer, and the policeman told the now silent blonde to stay in the car. A few seconds later, someone cut me out of my seatbelt and laid me on the ground. A competent set of hands checked my vitals, and within a few seconds, a harsh and demanding smell flooded my clotting nose. I fought it for a few seconds and made a pretty good display of a man coming around after having been knocked out. I immediately made to throw myself to the side, and I stopped, half being restrained and half staring wildly around to see what had happened. The medic sat back when I sat up, looked at the front end of my truck and moaned. "What the heck did that idiot do to my truck?" He told me to lie back down and started asking me professional questions about where I hurt and could I feel my toes and all that crap. Every few seconds I'd look back at the wreck and mutter about the idiot backing up like that. And what the hell had he been smoking? Little bits of angry stuff. The policemen have gotten the blunt statement, walked over and asked me if I felt too talking. I said I felt fine, just a little sore. The medic okayed it and helped me to my feet. I gave the officer my license and proof of insurance and included my retired military ID card. Then sat on my front seat and, as if I just noticed it, asked what had happened to my seat belt. He explained that I had to be cut out of it, and I shrugged. Just another item for his insurance company to pay for, I guess. What the heck was his story, officer? Why did he back up that way? The police looked sharply at me and asked me what I meant. I described exactly what had happened, but concealed the fact that I knew that it was a female driving the Chevy and kept referring to her as him. After I got done and he'd finished writing it all down, he asked if I had any proof. Proof? What do you mean proof? I frowned at him, then let my jaw drop a bit. Hey, wait a minute. You ain't telling me that guy, that idiot, is saying that I did this, are you? He admitted that the other driver's story was that I'd rear-ended her, not him, and then threatened her with a tire iron. I frowned again and informed him that I did not have a tire iron, that it was sitting in the garage of my house a couple of hours away. I moved aside as he searched the cab of my truck and caught a lucky break when he noticed, without my having to point it out to him, that my truck was still in reverse. He got out of my cab, frowning, then asked me to stay where I was and walked up to the Chevy. He then asked the blonde to step out of her car and, when she'd done so, he leaned into the open driver's side door. After a few seconds, he stood back up and asked the girl to repeat her statement of what happened. It was a marvelously teary bit of acting, but she almost blew it by being somewhat puzzled when he did not react. Instead, he asked her to go on and describe everything that had happened after the incident and everything she's done then. She backed down from the tire iron story, saying that it might have simply been a reflection on her window, but insisting that I'd at least beaten her window, and that I'd simply been putting on an act for their benefit. The policeman looked over at the medic, who slowly shook his head. Years of doing search and rescue might not have done much good for me physically, but I sure as hell know what an unconscious man acts like. The policeman then asked her if she tried to drive away or had she immediately shut off her engine. She said that the engine had died, and no matter what lies I'd said, that she'd never tried to leave the scene of the accident. The policeman nodded once and asked the medic to step over. He then asked the medic to sit in the Chevy and confirmed that it was in reverse. I love smart people. I didn't even have to suggest he check. When I last saw the little blonde, she was honestly crying. She was also handcuffed and being driven away. Arrested for making a false police report, some legal mumbo-jumbo about trying to run a con, and my favorite part, assault and battery. Once she'd realized that she had blown it, about the same instant she was handcuffed, she started weeping and explaining that she didn't have the money for the payments on the car, and that her only option was to fake an accident, but I've been faking it too, and hadn't been injured at all. You gotta believe me, she wouldn't lie about that. I signed my name to an almost letter-perfect statement of events over the police station, being careful to never mention in my own statement about how my nose got banged up, or how I'd ended up unconscious and hanging out of the door. The arresting officer's report as well as the EMTs had already noted that it appeared that I'd either been partially ejected by the impact or might have been trying to get out of the truck at the last moment. I've always believed that one should never sign one's name to a false statement. Wisest in the long run, don't you think? Turned out that her car insurance was good, however. They paid for my little pickup's repair. The damage was not as bad as it originally looked. Thank God. A little front-end work, a new radiator, and assorted other dinged and dented gizmos. A little cosmetic surgery to make her outside look right once more. Hell, the mechanic is even going to toss in a full overhaul, including fixing that freaking fan belt. I had to drive a loaner for the next week and also take care of the blonde's insurance, and the irony of this will make you laugh. It was a little red Chevy. Nice car, and my wife and I had a ball riding in it. But way too expensive for a guy like me to drive every day. Hell, a car that nice might have made me try something stupid to make the payments. Next story. I can only make deposits, withdrawals, and buy money orders? Okay. My previous mid-sized obscure bank merged with another slightly bigger but equally obscure bank several years ago. All the familiar, friendly faces were replaced by younger, less and friendly staffers. I walk in and ask one of the tellers to change my $20 paper bill to quarters. I need a bunch of quarters because the building that I worked in had quite a vending machine. I'm talking cinnamon buns, coffee cakes, gourmet hot chocolate, and so on. The building owner imported the machine from Japan. There is just one problem. It is very temperamental when it comes to paper bills. It eats bills constantly. Sometimes bills get mangled and shredded. The teller, let's call him Cletus, looked at me the same way that someone would look at a bunch of junk mail. Cletus says, "We cannot do that here. A previous staff may have done so in the past, but as you know, we've absorbed this branch. We cannot accommodate unusual requests such as yours unless you have a merchant/business account." He wasn't making eye contact now. He was just fiddling about with his keyboard and monitor cables. His next words were the ones that set me off. "I can help the next person in line." Oh, it's on. Wait a second. I have a few questions about my account. What am I allowed to do? He sighs and says, "Withdrawals, deposits, buy money orders. Any restrictions or limits on how many times I can do?" Cletus now speaking very fast and being very animated. "No restrictions, any denomination. You just cannot walk up and ask us to make change for whatever cash you walk into the branch with." Okay, I'm happy to comply. Here we go. I say, "I'd like $100 in 20s, another $100 in 10s, another $100 in 5s, and another $100, but this time I'd like 80 singles and 20 in quarters." "Fine. Like I said, any kind of withdrawal or deposit is fine for your type of account." He counts everything in front of me, hands me the cash and asks, "Anything else, boss?" I pocket the $20 roll of quarters and say, "Yes, I would like to deposit $380 to my account, please, Chief." I vividly remember his shoulders drooping and his eyes closing in disgust. Needless to say, I closed my account the next time that I stopped by. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching and see you next time.